right, let's get underway. Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar, Go Beyond Email with Predictive Content in Marketo Engage. For those of you who don't know JTF Marketing or are new to us, we've been around for about 8 years. We specialize in Marketo Engage and maximizing its capabilities and aligning it to your business requirements, helping you basically to take the power of automation and put it into action, helping your teams get more done and more efficiently. And we like those challenges that might seem a little bit difficult for you or potentially even your previous partners. So if you've got any real challenges and real issues that you've been stuck with for a long time and can't find a solution, do let us know. We love those challenges. Keeps our certified experts very happy looking for solutions. So I'm James Fletcher. I'm one of the certified architects here at JTF Marketing, specializing in Marketo. Today, we're going to get through quite a bit of content surrounding predictive content. It's to give you a bit of a flavor for what's possible, and also hopefully inspire you to go away and play with the functionality and hopefully understand it a little bit better. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are recording this. We will have 30 minutes worth of time for Q&A at the end. So if you need to jump off, then feel free to do so, and we'll make sure that you get the recording after today's session. So first of all, let's start with what is predictive content. For those of you who have been around Marketo for a while, you might know this tool as Content AI. It was rebranded a few years ago, but predictive content is all about understanding what content works and doesn't work in your Marketo instance. So what content have you got on your website? How are people engaging with it? And importantly, what is working from a conversion rate perspective? Now, it's important here to understand that all of this content is collected through engagement of cookied individuals on your website in order to build this library within Marketo. There is a limitation in most licenses. So if you have the functionality for free, there's around 25 pieces as the restriction within your license, but you can add additional content. So it's really important that we optimize this really well. And again, this is all about trying to get the content that works in front of the users that we're trying to convert, right? So bear that in mind when we start thinking about use cases and start thinking about how do we use predictive content in our campaigns. Try and maximize it in the areas where you are looking to acquire. It's probably going to be the best use case for you, but we'll get into those use cases in a little bit more detail later on. Of course, there's a couple of elements to this. One is understanding what content we've got, how does it work, what's trending, what's not trending. There's also that element of trying to tailor the customer journey with content that works. So if you've got a lot of content and you're trying to figure out, okay, which pieces work on acquiring a new customer or which pieces are not working, this will hopefully help you see a little bit more insight into that content. It's also very useful when you're thinking about A/B testing content types. So if you're a content marketing manager rather than a marketing operations manager or an email manager, you might be thinking about what content styles work for my audience. What is getting most engagement? How do I find the right kinds of content? And you'll see different kinds and types. And if you're watching the LinkedIn chatter at the moment, there's lots of people saying the download is dead, the guide is dead, stop creating all these heavy download files. We don't see that when we look at some of the data within Content AI. So I think it, again, might differ based on your audience. So another way of proving the theory, is it happening to your industry yet? Well, let's find out using some clever technology. Of course, all of this is determined to try and drive higher engagement across your prospecting customer base, right? So depending on your style of marketing, whether you're trying to attract, whether you're trying to convert, or whether you're trying to retain, again, you can use this in various use cases. Now, there's a couple of steps to getting predictive content up and running, and forgive me if I drop in Content AI through this. I keep going back to the old wording and I try to remember every time. First thing is the auto discovery. So when we deploy predictive content, we basically have to index the content that is available on your website, right? How do we do that? You either have to go clicking one by one and creating all the content as a cookied user, or as you're promoting your content in your various emails and whatever, as you've enabled the discovery, you will actually be able to auto pick up some of this content. Once we've discovered that content and you enable it within predictive content to be tracked and leveraged, you can then start to see who are the people who are engaging, what is the right audience for that piece of content, and you can start getting very specific, right? So there's a number of tags that we can apply to the content, be it types, audiences, etc. And we'll have a quick look at some examples of that later on, and be able to then serve it to the right audience using the learn and engage capability. So this is using machine learning or AI, however you want to position it. It is all about using the intelligence and historic data to serve up your content to the right people. Now, there's one gotcha here, which is if you've got a piece of content that you are spinning off in multiple angles to different audiences, then you will see that one piece do really well. It's not necessarily going to help you spin the right angle to the right audience. So bear that in mind as you're thinking about different angles and different content types. You may see, depending on what you choose to track in predictive content, different spin-offs of that main asset. So bear that in mind as you're building out your content strategy. We'll then gather the insights, of course, and we can start to have a look at that either through the engagement lens in terms of who is engaging with this content, who's viewing it, or we can look at conversions if we have Marketo forms in place. So we'll get that closed loop effect of we've created a new piece of content, we've distributed it through multiple channels. We're now analyzing the results of that to understand whether it worked or didn't work. Now, to give you some use cases, here's just two very simple use cases and probably the easiest ones to get up and running. Imagine you've got your email, for example. You can add in these predictive content containers, and this is what they look like when they're empty. And then you can start to populate them. What is the kind of content I want to show there? Is it a webinar? Is it a download? Is it a checklist? Is it a case study? Again, there's lots of different use cases you can put in depending on the email that you're sending. Now, this is working from an email content perspective, and it's kind of this boring square tile. It's very, very hard to style predictive content at this point in time, unless you have a very good email developer who can work the content into a different style. So bear that in mind also as you're thinking about how can I make this look nice and engaging. There is some limitations around content, AI, predictive content. In terms of that styling, the length of the text and the titles, etc., and the placement of them, and you'll find that in the UI. You can play around with the different layouts. Now, there's also this rich media element, right, which is actually about putting predictive content onto your website. So how many of us on the call have sat there looking at our web pages going, wouldn't it be great if this specific product page had all the relative content based on that product? Well, you can do that with predictive content in probably a handful of clicks. So again, if you're looking at actually driving further engagement on existing product pages, you can also do that using rich media embedding of content on your web pages, or it could be a landing page. Now, there's a couple of things to bear in mind here. Use it wisely, top of the funnel, obviously quite easy to get people engaging and keeping the journey going. Newsletters, we all hate them. If you want to promote the top performing assets, get them into Content AI, serve them up that way. Or you can also use the newest assets in order to get people engaging with those as well. So again, there's variants that we can look at. We find that often people miss a couple of good opportunities here. So if we think about emails, again, you've got those newsletters. Also think about your webinar confirmation emails. So those confirmation emails get 60% open rate. They're the highest open rate generally in all emails that we send. They're a very engaged audience. So let's use predictive content to keep that journey flowing, not just, great, I've got that webinar coming up. That's one step. How do we keep that journey moving? So that's really, really important. You can also think about using it in the context of case studies. Again, that's very useful when you're starting to position case studies with different audience types. So for example, if you were an investment bank and you're targeting people who are coming up to retirement, you might have case studies of where someone has invested in your funds and been successful. Or if you are a software company and you're trying to serve up industry specific verticals, again, you can do that as well. So there's lots of different ways we can use predictive content in the mix of improving our customer journey. Now, there's a bit of a checklist here of how to get this set up. So if you've got access to it within your instance, you will see a screen like the one on the right-hand side here when you are launching. And it's normally pretty empty. There's normally no content in it because you haven't enabled it, but there's a couple of steps to go through. First things first, you've got to define what the algorithm is going to do. So you're going to either base it on engagement or conversion. Annoyingly, you can only have one or the other right now. So you've got to choose where you're going to put it. You're putting it from an engagement perspective, or you're looking at conversion rates. Now, my view on this is if you want to track conversion rates of content, you should be tracking them within programs in Marketo that are specific to the content piece and not necessarily the channel. So again, you can think about that and how you're going to build that out, but ultimately track the content as a channel in Marketo, looking for its success in order to measure the effectiveness of its conversion rate. Reality is you should be using a couple of tricks anyway on the forms, so things like known visitor forms, pre-fills, email validations, et cetera, in order to reduce the number of clicks to actually engage with the content anyway. If you need any more advice on that, feel free to reach out to us. There's a few tricks that we can play in order to boost your conversion rates using Marketo forms. The second thing is we've got to create content patterns. Now, depending on how your website is structured, this may or may not work very well for you. The way that predictive content works is it will track all of the engagement of known visitors on your website and look at the URL structure. So if you've got something like jtfmarketing.co/training or jtfmarketing.co/resources or jtfmarketing.co/services or downloads, events, whatever it might be, that URL structure is going to help you categorize the content. Now, if you haven't got a good URL structure on your website, bad news is you're going to need to go and talk to the web team and get it fixed. So if it's one of those things in the backlog, you might have a reason to prioritize it in order to get the structure of your website correct. The third thing is there is a specific JavaScript that we need to deploy in order to make this effective. So we need to get that into our tag managers or our web pages that we want to track the content on and auto discover content. And then we'll start seeing some of the content appear. We've then got our categories. These might be case studies, downloads, articles, press releases. Again, just be conscious of the limit that you've got here. Adding in multiple pieces of content into the license fee isn't very expensive. I can't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think it's in the hundreds of dollars rather than thousands. So do consider adding more content into your license fee if this is going to work. Run a pilot, of course, in one specific use case. It's always the best way to use these limiting functionalities to understand what works. Once we've got the content discovered, as you can see, I've got some discovered content here in the middle. You can then activate it for predictive content. What does that actually mean? It means if I've got a piece of content that's performing really well, let's say it's a blog post or a web page, and I want to promote it further, I can then activate it to be available within predictive content, which means it will show up in one of those little boxes or on the rich media or wherever that audience is deployed. The next thing we're going to have to think about is optimizing the content. Now, there's a couple of elements to this. First one is actually starting to optimize the images. So the images are a certain size, the buttons, the text, the language. Again, you're going to play with that in order to optimize it. One thing is you can't use any tokens, which is quite frustrating. But again, you can keep it very generic and keep people focused on either the engagement goal or the conversion goal that you're working towards. Once you've optimized that content, you can approve it and it will be then readily available and will start appearing in your predictive content module. So whether it's in your email, rich media, you've also got a bar that you can put on the website as well. So if you're running an event and you're trying to promote it to a specific audience, you can also use this bar, which is pretty helpful. That's it. Once it's up and running, we start to see what results we get over the next couple of weeks. But remember, if you're going to deploy this to your website, there will be some changes required in order to make it happen. You'll start to see some of the analytics appear within 24 hours. The dashboard's a little bit slow, but you will start to see some of this information pop up. What have we discovered? What is active? And then also, how many pieces have you got approved at any one time? And then you'll see the sources of engagement. So you'll be able to track which of your channels is working best. If you're deploying through email, which is typically the easiest channel, you'll start to see whether you're getting a lot of clicks and a lot of engagement on those pieces of content. Now, there's one thing that I would say when it comes to choosing the algorithm, whether you're going for conversions or engagement, is engagement is the best thing to track when it comes to content, not necessarily conversions. I will reinforce it. If you want to track conversions, do it within a program within Marketo Engage. So we've kind of already talked about this in the walkthrough of that checklist, but just to go back through the couple of options you've got, you can either deploy predictive content in your emails as predictive content modules. Now, in order to make this possible, you do need to have a modular template in Marketo. If you don't have a master modular template, let us know. We've got a free version kicking around that you can have access to. And if you need it, just drop a message in the chat or in the QA, and we'll get that to you after this webinar. For those of you who are thinking about website deployment, there's the JavaScript that you've got to deploy, and you've also got to make sure that that goes out and is approved. And if you've got caching on your website, you may need to wait longer before that is deployed. Algorithm settings, again, we're looking at clicks and engagement, who's clicking on the content, and how can we get people to engage with that. Again, think about it only as a step to promote your content. So if you remember all these little pop-ups that we used to get back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, that's the kind of idea. It's in your face, click on it, move through to the page, and then convert. From a conversions perspective, again, submitting forms. Again, I'll keep reinforcing, don't use it for that purpose because you can track that using Marketo programs. Focus on that engagement piece of getting content in front of people that works. Common gotchas. Again, a bit of a recap here. URL structure is absolutely critical. If your URL structure is not good, it's not going to help you. If you need some advice on it and you want to just talk it through, let us know. Happy to jump on a call and just have a look at the structure of your pages. Most common uses and content that we're going to use is blog posts. It's going to be downloads. It's going to be case studies. It's going to be webinars, resources, whatever they are. Just check those URL structures. If you've got a website running on a CMS, it's generally structured pretty well, but if it's not, it shouldn't be that difficult to change. You can use redirects, but it's a little bit more fiddly. So if you need some support, let us know. We're happy to help on that. Again, layouts can be quite limiting in terms of the styling and look and feel. So remember that as you're thinking about what can it look like. Simple is best. That's the only advice I'll give you. Keep it as simple as possible. Focus on the clicks, get people through to the page, and you can optimize your conversion pages for those conversions. Conversion rates are only available when using Marketo forms. Really, really important. Again, I'll repeat again, use programs to track content. It's the best way to do it. And you'll see who has accessed it and potentially who hasn't converted. And you can chase those up to download them or send them the link directly, right? There's different ways we can optimize content engagement as well, not only through email. So if you want some tips on that, again, I'm happy to talk to you offline about those tips that I've got in my head. You might need some support from your web team. It might be a big job depending on the CMS you've got. So hopefully it's not. Hopefully it's something you can test and learn with really quickly. And as ever, when we're trying to show the business, what does this look like? It's a nightmare. It's a bit like dynamic content. If you've got 15 different verticals and you CMO wants to see every single version, well, you need to log in. This is also hyper-personalization. It's not just this version's different for Susan because she works in that industry, and for Bob, it's this. This is based on the content that is performing well within a set period of time. This will be constantly evolving. Therefore, you can't show examples of what it's going to look like unless you send yourself an example and you've engaged with a bunch of content that allows you to be part of the target audience. So, bit of a recap, and I'll move on to some of the Q&A because I've seen there's some questions coming in. Automatically presenting the most relevant content to drive engagement across email or website. So again, email modules or rich media sections on the website. Similar to dynamic content, it works in the same way. We're building an audience, we're targeting them. The only thing here is it's driven by AI through engagement metrics or conversion metrics in order to encourage conversions or engagement. Use cases, again, there's a ton of them. I'd love to know some of the ideas that you've got flicking around in your head. I'm sure there is. There's newsletters, there's downloads, there's confirmation emails, There is follow-up messages for form fills. Try and use all of those where you get a high volume of engagement. Or if you're getting low engagement on newsletters, this might be something to bring to the top of your newsletter and try and say, this is the most engaged content across our website, or this is the thing that people in the technology sector are reading right now. Use that language to drive some urgency as well. Now, we do have a training course specifically focused on getting predictive content up and running. So if you're interested, we've added in for this webinar only a little discount code here to get 20% off that course. So feel free to go and jump into that. Scan the QR code. We'll put it in the email as we follow up as well, but it will take you through the step-by-step guide of getting it set up. And you've got also the content set up checklist. So hopefully that'll be pretty useful for you. We will be running some additional events as well as training. So if you get any ideas, if there's anything you want any support on, let us know. Feel free to reach out to us and we'll follow up with a recording. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.